Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining today's presentation on creating BearWise Community Partnerships. My name is Brian Fainer, and I'm with the National Park Service and help support our Connected Conservation effort. The Connected Conservation webinar series focuses on how NPS staff and partners can use various tools and strategies to conserve natural, cultural, and recreation resources at the landscape level. Working with gateway communities outside parks is critical to landscape scale conservation, and as such, our webinar series is exploring the numerous opportunities to partner with communities to further conservation. You can register for future webinars in our series and view past recordings by going to the Network for Landscape Conservation website or our internal National Park Service Connected Conservation Toolkit. And there are links to both of these resources in the chat box. Throughout the presentation, feel free to plug in questions into the questions box. We'll look at everyone's questions following the presentation. We will post a recording of today's webinar following the presentation. And as a reminder, our webinar series is open to federal and state agencies, nonprofits, and other conservation partners, so feel free to invite your colleagues to future webinars. We have 4 presenters with us today. Linda Masterson is the author of the book Living with Bears, A Practical Guide to Bear Country. The book has become a bear reference book of choice for wildlife agencies, biologists, parks, forests, communities, and people trying to live more responsibly with bears. LaVonne Ewing is the owner and managing partner of the Image Resources in Pixie Jacks Press. Pixie Jacks Press is the independent book publisher that has been producing environmental nonfiction bestsellers since 1995. Dan Gibbs serves as the Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency's Black Bear Program leader and chairs the BearWise program. I'm sorry to embarrass Dan, but in 2017, he was named the Wildlife Biologist of the Year by the Southeastern Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. Bill Stiver is a supervisory biologist at the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, where he oversees the park's wildlife management program, including black bear management, wild hog control, bat research and monitoring, and elk research and monitoring. Linda, LaVonne, Dan, and Bill, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Brian, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Today we're going to introduce you to those of you that may not be familiar with Great Smoky Mountains National Park. We want to introduce you to the park and the park's bear management program. We want to give you some background on our partnership with the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, particularly as it relates to bear management, and we want to share how this partnership has helped foster, a community task force to address human-bear conflicts. And lastly, we want to introduce you to BearWise and how it can help you with some similar efforts. So Great Smoky Mountains National Park is located on the border of Tennessee and North Carolina. It's about 800 square kilometers in size, or square miles in size. If you look at this map here, you can see there's a lot of Forest Service land to the south and to the north. But on the Tennessee side, here in Blount and Sevier County, it's all private land. Of course, the Smokies is known for its spectacular views and its biological diversity. More than 19,000 species have been identified in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. It also provides a lot of recreational opportunities. There's 10 front country campgrounds, over 100 backcountry campsites, over 800 miles of hiking trails, including 74 miles of the Appalachian Trail. Now, the park is located in very close proximity to a majority of the U.S. population, within a day's drive of many of the people that live in the eastern United States. So we have a lot of visitors. In fact, last year we had 12.5 million visitors to Great Smoky Mountains National Park. We also have a lot of bears. The current bear population is estimated to be about 1,600. That's about 2 bears per square mile. It's one of the highest densities in North America. And that estimate comes from research done by the University of Tennessee. Dr. Mike Pelton started studying bears here in the Smokies in the late 60s. So we have one of the longest ongoing bear research programs in the world. So that combination of 1,600 bears and 12.5 million visitors, we do have quite a few human-bear conflicts. Now, our partnership with TWRA actually stems back way back to the 50s when the park actually first started doing wild hog control. Wild hogs historically were a big game species in Tennessee and North Carolina, and a very politically sensitive species. So we had agreements to actually trap hogs, donate them to the states, and relocate them out onto public lands that were open to hog hunting. Over time, that agreement changed, and now we work cooperatively, and we're part of Tennessee's Wild Hog Eradication Action Team. And you can see here there's lots of other partners on that action team to eradicate hogs from the state of Tennessee. We've worked with TWRA on a lot of other projects, including white-tailed deer restoration in East Tennessee back in the early 80s, peregrine falcon hacking, barn owl augmentation, river otter reintroductions, and more recently, we're part of the Tennessee Bat Working Group, which is an effort to coordinate the conservation of bats in Tennessee. With respect to black bears, we worked with TWRA and Tennessee Bear and Boar Association to actually reintroduce bears into the Big South Fork National River and Recreation Area, which is also a national park unit. Although we only reintroduced 27 bears from the Smokies up to the Big South Fork, that population is now thriving. We have a long relationship with TWRA on black bear research. In fact, much of the research done by Dr. Mike Pelton was also supported by TWRA. Currently, we're working with TWRA as well as the state of North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, and Kentucky to come up with a regional black bear population estimate. And this is all part of the work of the Southern Appalachian Black Bear Study Group. We've also worked together to provide a variety of training and workshops over the years. We hosted or co-hosted bear attack response training. We've done chemical immobilization training, Eastern Black Bear Workshop, and most recently the 2018 Human Bear Conflicts Workshop. Of course, we have a long partnership in dealing with human bear conflicts both in and out of the park. And in respect to the park, we do have bear-proof containers throughout the park, mostly dumpsters, and as you can see, even on some days, it's hard to contain all the trash that 12.5 million people bring to this park. We have a lot of education material. We have a strong education component to our bear management program, as well as law enforcement, and we have almost an army of volunteers supporting both the education aspect of bear management. We even have food storage cables at all of our backcountry campsites. And in fact, when installed and maintained properly, it's never been defeated by a bear. And you can see this bear here at Spencefield Shelter a few years ago, trying to get somebody's food that was hung. But nonetheless, we still actively manage a lot of bears. In fact, over the last 10 years, we have handled about 50 bears a year due to human bear conflicts. Unfortunately, we have a cooperative agreement with TWRA as well as Cherokee National Forest. And this agreement allows us to provide mutual aid and assistance to each other in managing bears in our region. And this might include sharing equipment, using rehab facilities such as the Appalachian Bear Rescue, and when necessary, relocating bears out onto Forest Service land. And in fact, we relocate about 10 bears per year out onto Forest Service land. All right.
Thank you, Bill. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes kind of bringing in to what Bill just gave you background-wise as to what's going on outside the park boundaries along the Tennessee side. And once again, here's another picture of Gatlinburg, and you can see how it's nestled in and around the park. And I do want to, before I get going, just make the point that we deal with a lot of issues in these gateway communities that surround the resident, the year-round residents, things such as garbage, bird feed, dog food, things like that. The same issues a lot of other people deal with. We have those issues as well in these communities, but today we're kind of focusing on the impact that tourism seems to have and some of the challenges related to that. So with that, I'll kind of go into this. So any given weekend, for most weekends out of the year, this is what you're going to see if you're looking into Pigeon Forge with the park to your back. All these people coming in. Bill just mentioned, 12.5 million people a year are coming to the park. And there's even more than that coming into this general area, because a lot of people come into these gateway communities, but they never even set foot in the park. These communities are actively trying to make these year-round destinations, whether it be a New Year's Eve party in Gatlinburg, or car shows in Pigeon Forge, or 4th of July parades, whatever it may be. There's always something going on. And if you're not looking for one of these organized events, you've got things like this that are available to you 365. So whether or not people are coming to this area to some of those specific attractions, or they are coming to get into the park, there is a common denominator that they all have, and that is they need somewhere to stay. They're going to come down here and spend anywhere from more than likely 48, 72 hours, maybe a little bit longer, and they're going to probably rent a cabin, a chalet, maybe a hotel, but get a lot of rentals in these chalets and these cabins, and most of them are, as you see in this picture, they're nestled into the woods. There's just a whole lot of cover that allows bears to move around, and obviously these areas are generating trash. So this is where many of our problems begin. And whether I mean, a bear that's in the park right now will be in town tonight, and vice versa. And Bill's going to talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But these kinds of things do impact what's going on in the park. And lastly, I'll mention this before I give it back to Bill. He mentioned park visitation, and here you can see the number of visitors in the park on a monthly basis during 2019. And July, as you expect, led it with 1.6 million people. But you can see this red line represents that from April through October, there's over 1 million people every month, and you're approaching 1 million in the month of November. And this is significant because this is the time of the year for us that bears are most active. And obviously, some time periods are a little bit less activity than others when your natural food sources such as soft mast and hard mast are available. But it's a very busy time for personnel dealing with bears and all the people. And I'll just kind of put it to this perspective. Think about this on a weekly basis. We're talking about between 250,000 and 400,000 people coming into this region every weekend, and most of them know nothing about bears. And how do you deal with that? And how do you educate these people and roll this over from a week-to-week basis? Bill.
Thanks, Dan. So the idea of a task force is really nothing new for us. In fact, the original task force was formed back in June of 1989, and it was coined the Problem Bear Task Force. And I know a lot of folks on this call are bear biologists. You're probably cringing on that problem bear phrase, but that's what it was back then. But we know it's human-bear conflict issues. Anyway, the reason the group came together was the Gatlinburg Police Department was dealing with a lot of bear issues in and around the city. And so they wanted to get together and kind of help try to resolve what those issues were. So the original group consisted of TWRA, the City of Gatlinburg, Park Service, and of course the University of Tennessee. And they discussed why bears were causing issues in and around the city and what were those challenges. Another group came in as well. The Chalet Village Homeowners Association joined the group, and there was one person in particular in that association that was really the catalyst to keep this group going. But over time, and I will stress over time, and that's maybe one of the take-home messages with forming a task force or something like that, is these things take time. But finally, in 2000, so 11 years later, the group was able to work with the city and come up with an ordinance that required animal-resistant garbage containers. At the same time, the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Commission passed a proclamation in that same zone that prohibited the feeding of bears. And this is a map showing that zone. And again, this map was identified based on the calls the city was getting. as well as the sort of the concept that if they bear-proof this area, that hopefully the bears wouldn't move further out into the community. One of the other amazing things was the group was able to hire another position that was partially funded by the city of Gatlinburg, partially funded by TWRA, and partially funded by one of our partners, the Great Smoky Mountains Association. The group also came up with some education material. The association worked with a professional advertising company to design this poster that was distributed throughout that same zone. So the group accomplished quite a bit. But over time, the group sort of fizzled out and sort of lost its momentum. But in the meantime, a few things happened. One, the bear population went from an estimated 400 to 600 to 1,600 bears. Park visitation went from 8.6 million to 12.5 million, and the residents in Sevier County doubled. And so we started seeing more and more bear issues in recent years, just an increasing trend. And we were also seeing bears with sort of advanced conflict behavior, and bears that would just show up and tear into a building or tear into a car. And we started wondering, you know, what effect, if any, development outside the park was having on bear issues both in and out of the park. So in 2015, we initiated a bear GPS study where we put GPS collars on bears, and we chose both bears that were involved in conflict as well as bears that were in the backcountry. And we wanted to let the bears just show us where we needed to focus our efforts. In 2016, we brought the task force back together. This time it was called the Gatlinburg Bear Task Force. And we had what we thought were all the right players at the table. You know, city managers, my superintendent. We had a really good group, and we had a lot of momentum going with that group. But unfortunately, chimney top fire hit in November of 2016, and we really lost all of our momentum. And again, that's another take home. Big events like that and this pandemic can really set task force back a little bit. And so you have to have the folks in there that can keep that momentum going. Nonetheless, the study went on, and we learned a lot. And one of the big things we learned was the home range sizes of some of the bears in the park, particularly male bears. This light blue area is the city ordinance, and this is being the dark blue being the home range. And so not only in terms of the city ordinance, but the park as a whole and how much area these bears were covering. And so this map shows some of the GPS locations of some of the bears we had collars on, and each purple dot is a GPS location. And you can see they're moving well beyond the zone. As a matter of fact, what we discovered is that over 90% of the male bears that we put GPS collars on are leaving the park and going out towards the gateway communities, and over 50% of the female bears. All right.
Okay, so to kind of bring this into a little bit bigger picture and set you up for an introduction to BearWise, here's a map of Tennessee and our two primary bear populations. And back when that first task force that Bill mentioned was developed, the bears in Tennessee were in the green, and for the most part, they were in the southern third of that area. Didn't have any bears at all in the upper northeast portion of the state. And since that time, they've done very well. Populations have grown and they're expanding. And then Bill mentioned the reintroduction efforts up at Big South Fork back in the early 90s, and the green represents that population now, and the bears there are doing very well. And I'll show you this map. I'm not getting into a lot of detail, but this is just a short period of time in Tennessee last year with sightings that were reported to us via the internet for bears. And it kind of gives you an idea of what we're dealing with in Tennessee as far as bear populations expanding into former range and doing very well, and having to deal with a lot of people that have never had bears in their backyard before, calling saying, hey, guess what I saw yesterday? And this isn't unique to Tennessee. We're seeing this all over the Southeast and really all over North America. You talk to state biologists and they'll all tell you the same thing, that they're seeing bears just move into areas that they've not been in a really long time, or in some cases that they've never been in at all. So the Southeast Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies has multiple working groups, and one of the groups is a large carnivore working group, and myself and all the statewide coordinators are members of this group, and we meet pretty regularly, at least once a year, and some of us get to meet more often than that with that other group that Bill mentioned, the Southern Appalachian Black Bear Study Group. So we get to interact a lot, and we've just been discussing how much time everybody is spending on these human-bear conflicts and trying to come up with the answers and the best way to educate people and the best way to address some of these things. And we kind of went back to what happened in the early 70s with the original Southern Appalachian Black Bear Study Group, and the realization that we needed to look at these animals on a population, on a large scale population level, I suppose would be the way to say it, rather than a local scale, because bears were moving back and forth from Tennessee to North Carolina. They still do. So we needed to work a little bit closer on how we were going to address these issues. And we were very successful in that. And so we got to just brainstorm and said, why shouldn't we be doing the same approach with this education program? So that's where BearWise started, so to speak. And some of the things that we wanted to do, we wanted to have a good education program that was managed by state wildlife agencies. We had seen some information indicating that less than 1% of people were going to their state wildlife agencies for information regarding black bears and bear management and conflict issues. And we just felt like that was unacceptable, and we wanted to try to change that dynamic. And we wanted it to be recognized and trusted as the go-to authority for black bear management. And we also wanted consistency across the Southeast. And what I mean by that is we wanted people, whether they were in Tennessee or if they traveled to Louisiana or traveled from Louisiana to South Carolina or any of these states, that they would be seeing the same types of messaging and the same brand, and know, hey, this is what I see at home. I trust this resource. So if this is what I'm seeing when I'm in Tennessee or around the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, then I'm going to take it to heart and heed the advice that I've been given. So that's where we wanted to go with it. And so we did a lot of talking, and we came up with the BearWise program, and we've been very pleased with how that's gone. And I'm not going to steal any of Linda's thunder. I'm going to turn it over to her here in just a minute. But I did want to mention a couple of things that we did accomplish on that other task force, that phase 2, so to speak. And one of them was this placemat. And we were just looking for something to put in front of kids at restaurants. Most restaurants you go to, and at least here, have placemats for kids to color and do activities while they're waiting on their food. And we thought it was a great opportunity to put an educational piece in front of them. And that task force, along with a lot of help of the National Park Conservation Association, we managed to get this pulled off. And we're very pleased with it. It is on the website now, and it's actually turned into an activity booklet as well. Another thing we've done more recently that I wanted to bring up is just the partnership with the Forest Service. Bill mentioned the Forest Service a couple of times, Cherokee National Forest specifically, and they came to us and asked us to help them with the BearWise message for their kiosks, and we put this together working with them, and it's got some specific things that they need to have in there regarding food storage requirements on the National Forest. So we're excited to have these out there. And then most recently, we've been working on this vacation tips, and Linda probably talk a bit more about this, but this was designed with this area in mind, but we've already got it up on the website too, because we've seen that there's needs in other parts of the country for a similar piece of information. So back to this area here real quickly, and then we're going to give this over to Linda. But the gateway communities that Bill's been talking about, we decided to start phase 3 of the task force, and we once again changed the name, and it's now the Smoky Mountains BearWise Community Task Force. And you know, Bill showed you the pictures of how the bears are moving, and we've talked a whole lot about Gatlinburg, and we've just come to the realization that even if you get Gatlinburg completely tightened up the way you want it to be, you've got all these other communities that are having the same issues now. So we saw a real need to expand this to all the gateway communities, and we also saw a need to take another look at who the partners are on this task force. And you know, when you're dealing with fires and things like COVID-19, city managers have a lot of other things that can pull their attention away, and that's understandable. So we were concerned about that, and then we were also just felt like that, hey, it's better to have your people that are living and working in your community to kind of take ownership of this issue so they can take it and run with it. And so now the committee, the task force rather, is made up of business owners, NGOs that are very active in the area, and then property owners, and they represent different types of businesses. They represent different communities. And now the National Park Service and Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, we're kind of over here off to the side, and we've got this line that we've drawn. We're serving more as facilitators and advisors, and just trying to give these folks some direction, give some technical advice when they need it, and just give them encouragement. And when we have opportunities that come to us that we feel like can be good for them, we're going to pass it on and let them take the lead and run with it. So we've been very happy with what's going on with this group. We're continuing to work through the COVID-19 epidemic. I've had several meetings on Zoom, and we're continuing to make progress, and Bill and I are both very excited to see where this group is going. And with that, I'm going to quit talking and let Linda Masterson jump in here.
Thank you, Dan and Bill. So now let's take a look at what makes BearWise unique and how you all can use BearWise to reach out to potential partners. So why are all these black bear biologists grinning ear to ear? I'm pretty sure this was the moment they realized that the years they'd spent working on creating a new kind of bear education program that everyone could get behind had finally paid off. Because BearWise is a program that professionals can trust and rely on because it's built on sound science. But BearWise is also a program people will use because everything is easy to find and easy to understand. Helping people live responsibly with black bears and providing tools for everyone trying to reach them. That's what BearWise is all about. And that has never been more important than it is right now. People populations are booming. Bear populations are growing. And conflicts and problems are growing too, especially for the bears that live around gateway communities. There were 328 million visits to national parks last year. And according to a new survey, about a third of the people who plan to take a summer vacation this year are heading to a national or a state park. You can bet most of those people will be staying in gateway communities. That means parks need help. Communities need help. Most of all, bears need help. There could not be a better time for BearWise. Because one more thing you can bet on is that most of those people aren't going to know much about bears, and a lot of what they think they know is wrong. The BearWise website can provide the right answers to the same bear questions all day long. From basics like, what color is a black bear? How fast can they run? What do they eat? to debunking all those black bear myths, like a bear standing up is getting ready to attack, and adult bears can't climb trees, or how close is too close, and why can't I feed the bears? To help, there's a bear in my yard or in my campground or my bird feeder or my car or on my deck. You will find the answers to all those questions and hundreds more on the BearWise website. When everyone puts all that information and all those resources to work, we can go from this to this. We can keep people safe, and we can keep bears wild. BearWise.org is organized into 5 main sections. People are fascinated with bears. About Bears is our second most popular section. Bear safety tips keep people and bears safe at home, around town, and outdoors. The BearWise Basics give you a blueprint for preventing problems. Community Resources is focused on getting people to start working together. And the BearWise store has lots of tools that you can use. We don't have enough time today to go through everything you will find on the website, but I'm going to give you a quick overview of just a few. The at-home BearWise Basics help people understand the most common situations that create problems and what to do to prevent them. Each basic has lots of information about what, why, and how, along with links to more resources. Bear Encounters is our most visited section, and we always see traffic go up after there's been a bear incident in the news. The BearWise safety tips arm people with the information they need to fish, hunt, hike, and vacation safely, to keep bears out, and to react the right way if they do encounter a bear. The Building BearWise Communities section has success stories, sample anti-feeding ordinances, and lots of other ways to help get everyone pointed in the right direction. And the BearWise store is full of free stuff. These activity sheets for kids are really popular, and they are so much fun to do, you barely realize how much you're learning. You can download and print several flyers yourself for free, or purchase them in quantity from the BearWise store. As Dan showed you, word is spreading about our new vacation tips flyer, and we've worked with the Forest Service to do that dual logo poster-sized version of the outdoor safety tips, and also with the National Parks and Conservation Association to produce a double-sided card-sized version of the at-home and outdoor BearWise Basics that they will be adding their logo to and mailing out to members in 8 states. Our weather-resistant sticker, Bear Magnet with the BearWise Basics, and the Living with Bears Handbook are also all in the store, and all purchases help support BearWise. So who is using BearWise? In May alone, we had more than 16,000 page views. Agencies, biologists, interpreters, media, businesses, parks, educators, HOAs. Why are so many people with so many different wants and needs all turning to BearWise? It's because BearWise is where they all find common ground. What are people doing with these materials? We require people to tell us how they plan to use the materials they download or purchase. Here's just a taste of what they're doing with them. Educating their mountain community, posting at campgrounds, putting up in rentals, publicizing in state magazines and other publications, emailing out to homeowners, using to educate kids to teach them to be BearWise. Basically, it's what every one of you working to reduce conflicts has been trying to get people to do for years. Users of BearWise are from all over. The person who downloaded the materials for staff training and safety is actually from Canada. What keeps people coming back to BearWise? It's easy. It's easy to find what you're looking for, and it's easy to put that information to work. Looking down the BearWise road, we hope it's going to be a very long road. And one of the real benefits of a web-based program is that it's also very easy to add resources, to add information, to add ways to keep people engaged, like our newsy email Bear Alerts. You can sign up for them when you go visit the website. And even though there's a ton of information already on the site now, we all feel as if we've barely scratched the surface. But BearWise is more than ready to go to work for you. So what's on your Bear wish list? You can use BearWise to open doors, to get people together and talking, to find those common goals and those objectives everybody can agree on. Take a minute and think about all the different types of people and businesses and organizations that all have a stake in preventing problems and reducing conflict. Make a list. Take a deep breath and start reaching out. I was going to tell you that once you start connecting with people, you will be amazed at who starts reaching back and just how much they can contribute. But the Smoky Mountain BearWise Task Force reached out to the media, and they convinced the local NBC affiliate they had a story that really needed to be told. So now I don't have to tell you, I can show you.
We're getting into one of the busiest times of year for run-ins between people and bears. It's a conflict that continues to grow, especially in communities around the Great Smoky Mountains.
10 News reporter Jim Matheny shows us people are restarting a team to tackle this complex problem.
Holy cow.
Memory comes from repetition and reinforcement. In Gatlinburg Chalet Village, black bears never forget how to land an easy meal.
I'll be honest, it's trying at times.
That's why S.J. Geist always remembers to keep her garbage bear-proof.
It's actually really easy. You have a clip, open it up, put your trash in, you close it, and you lock it.
Guy says bears quickly memorize the mistakes people repeatedly make in cabins and cars.
The craziest situation has been getting 6 bears out of 6 different vehicles in the last 4 weeks alone here in Chalet Village. It's not cute and funny. It's a safety risk.
Milder bears learn quickly. Places that surround the Great Smoky Mountains National Park have very short memories, because new waves of millions of tourists repeatedly show up with no prior knowledge of how to behave around bears.
How many times can you say, stay 50 yards away, secure your trash? If that bear is a dead bear, they're all BearWise basics.
So now the people who live and work around the Smokies are teaming up to repeat something that helped in the past by revamping a task force to make their communities what's called BearWise.
The Smoky Mountains BearWise Community Task Force,
empowering the residents
and trying to educate people to secure garbage, take down feeders. It comes right down to safety of people.
It's on all of us to coexist with the bears safely.
Prevent bears from getting hit on roads.
They don't care if you're honking the horn into your driveway.
The conflict with bears not only affects homes, it's bad for business.
Last year, we probably had about a dozen visits
from bears actually coming on to our front porch. All we need is just one bad accident, and that could be detrimental to a business or a town. What's driving these bears downtown? And bottom line, it's coming down to food.
One goal of the task force is to enforce the rules that are already in place that require bear proofing in parts of Gatlinburg, but also repeat those requirements in other areas. Because new GPS studies show that animals travel great distances, far beyond bear-proof zones to get to garbage.
You could bear-proof one street, but if your neighbor is not bear-proof, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot.
And here's a perfect example of that in Gatlinburg. This is Highway 321. On this side of the highway, you're in the zone that requires these bear-resistant trash cans that are hard for the animals to break into. And the garbage is always greener on the other side because bears just have to cross the street to get out of that ordinance zone to find flimsy trash cans that are easy pickings.
What we're trying to do is to see if we can spread those ordinances to where it impacts greater areas.
Gatlinburg's ordinance was a proactive step a few decades ago. But since then, the number of people living around the park has doubled. The bear population has tripled.
We got a lot more people, we got a lot more bears, and we got a lot more visitors.
The task force aims to find more solutions, to make bear safety part of everyone's collective memory, something Guy says we need to stop repeating the mistakes that inevitably killed this icon of the Smokies.
You know, when the bear breaks into a car, a trash can, a home, it's not good news for the bear. The bear is often euthanized. It's a wonderful place to live and visit, but we also need to hold ourselves accountable and do what's right to safeguard ourselves and the bears.
In Gatlinburg, Jim Matheny, WBIR 10 News.
Thank you. You know, when we were first asked to do this webinar, we assumed our audience would be mostly federal employees, but the registration list includes everyone from citizens groups and businesses, state agencies, NGOs. It is such a diverse audience. Really thought about that, and I think the one thing everyone has in common is bears. Bears bring people together, and BearWise makes it easy to find common ground and work together to find common solutions. So with that, Brian, I think we are ready for questions.
Sorry about that, was on mute. Fantastic, guys. Thank you so much for a great presentation. We've got a bunch of questions coming in. Here's the first one. Are there efforts like BearWise being deployed or being developed in other areas of the country?
Thank you, Brian. This is Dan. I'll address that. We've had that question come to us quite a bit, and I can say that we're in the process of working with the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies to expand it to other parts of the country, and we're hoping that that's going to happen hopefully in the next few months. By the end of the year, there'll be some more opportunities for folks to in other states to be able to utilize some of these things. And then I know that North Carolina is doing a lot of work as well with in the Asheville area. They've been doing a lot of radio colored bears with an urban type study that kind of goes really well with what we've done over here in Tennessee in the park. And so they got a pretty active program in Asheville as well.
Fantastic. Here's another one. Why is taking a community approach preferable to focusing on individuals?
I'm not sure what they mean by that question.
I'm gonna guess, like, you know, kind of getting a community like Gatlinburg together, you know, some of the folks together versus just kind of working at an individual level, you know, rather than the city of Gatlinburg.
Well, I think we kind of alluded to it, but you know, it's just when you get the community behind it, it's really hard when you're dealing, you know, especially from a state perspective, when you're going around in an area where you have a neighborhood and you're trying to talk to one landowner at a time, one homeowner at a time, and trying to get them to change their behavior. And sometimes that's what it takes. But in a situation where you're bringing in 12.5 million people a year into 2.5 county area in East Tennessee, you got to go at it a bigger picture. And we all think that we're just scratching the surface with some opportunities here. And, you know, we would like to start looking at what, you know, we've had a couple people talk about Expedia and, you know, all these websites that, hey, is this a BearWise hotel that I'm looking at renting for the weekend? And there's a lot of options out there for us to explore. But I just think it's like any other major change in human behavior. Everybody's got to get on board, and it takes time. And I just feel like we all believe that going at the community approach shows buy-in by the residents, by the business owners, and it's not a situation where they feel necessarily that they're being mandated to do something. It's more of a voluntary type approach. And I hope that addresses that question. If it didn't, that person's more than welcome to contact one of us and we can talk about it a little bit further.
Well, here's a somewhat related question. Is there an effort underway to expand the bear safe ordinances around the Smokies?
Well, again, I think that's something that this group, you know, would, as they come together and have accomplishments, that they would approach different communities around the park to potentially implement something similar that Gatlinburg has done. Again, that was a pretty proactive response by the city of Gatlinburg, and they're still funding that position. That's a co-funded position to deal with human bear conflicts. But yeah, that would be the goal, would be to expand. You know, the bears themselves showed us where we need to put our efforts, and it's all those gateway communities surrounding the park.
And I'll add to that, one of the things that we're talking about is just kind of going at this at the right pace and make sure that you don't get the cart ahead of the horse, so to speak, because the last thing you want to see is 6 gateway communities and all have 6 different types of ordinances that may or may not work together. You don't want people to be confused and they move from one area to the other. So that's another benefit for the task force taking the lead in something like that, is they can work with those communities together and throw out, you know, the ideal circumstances, and hopefully, you know, it's kind of a domino effect. You know, the hope is that if 1 or 2 get on board, the others will follow. And
great. Here's another one. Nothing was discussed regarding cost. Is there a cost associated with this, either for the community members or the agency?
If we're talking about, once again, that question is a little bit open-ended, but as far as the BearWise program itself, it's currently being funded by the Southeastern Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies and their operating budget. So each year, the directors designate a certain amount of money for us to utilize for this program. So that's what's paying for the BearWise program as is right now. We have just recently launched that store that Linda mentioned, and we are expecting revenue from that. And as we move forward with a transition, hopefully, to a larger scale program, we'll be looking at some other mechanisms to help with the funding of the program. Now, as far as BearWise programs in communities, that's an outstanding question, and it's a question that I know everybody that's listening that works for a state wildlife agency is going to struggle with. And what I would say is each agency has its own means to generate revenue. For some of us, it's easier than others. I would encourage people to look at their partners. You know, these bear-resistant trash cans aren't cheap. I will say, I'll put a plug in for the city of Gatlinburg. I noticed yesterday they put 90 new bear-resistant trash cans in over the fall. and they were in areas that we had really been asking for that to happen, and they listened to what was being said, and my calculation is they invested almost $100,000 in those trash cans. So it isn't cheap, but there are lots of opportunities out there. Some other states like Florida have had really good success with cost share programs with cities and communities. And in Tennessee, we're looking at that as an option. And I actually got an email from another state biologist about an hour before we started inquiring about the same type of thing that they're looking at doing. So funding, you just got to go out there and be resourceful. And but the good thing is, I guess it's a good thing, is people typically are willing to put money towards bear management. It's not a species that you have a hard time getting interest in. So, and we've done studies in Tennessee that show the general public would get behind things like required bear-proof trash cans and things like that in communities, and would be willing to fund them.
Great. Here's a related question. What advice would you give people looking to start partnering and creating BearWise type programs?
Well, you need to be open to all partners, all potential partners. Everybody, like Linda said, everybody loves bears, and everybody needs to come to the table. The other piece of advice I would give is to be patient and be persistent. I was actually at the first task force meeting in June of 1989, and I'm still on it. So some of these things take time and hard work, and you just got to stick it out.
Here's another one. Why is the park so committed to BearWise? Are there other options of getting the same results?
Well, I can tell you that collaborating with state agencies on BearWise community efforts are a high priority for the park. Obviously, bears are an icon species to the park, and protecting bears is important to us. So important that it's even in my performance standard this year. So working with Dan and our communities and protecting bears is just a real high priority for us.
Great. Here's a comment. There are similar efforts with other regions of the country regarding bears. The Rocky Mountain West has black bear and grizzly bear programs. How has this effort coordinated with other regions outside the Southeast?
Well, as I said earlier, we're in the process of hopefully making that transition. And I think the main difference, and I mentioned it earlier, is that this is a program that is funded and managed by the state wildlife agencies. And to me, it makes it a little bit different, because these are, our agencies are the ones that are dealing with these issues on a day-to-day basis, and we got a lot of skin in the game, so to speak, to see that these issues decrease, and in some cases, hopefully go away. And so, as far as coordinating with these other states and these other programs, it's going to be interesting as we move forward. And we've talked about that a little bit, that a lot of that information that we need, especially if you bring in another species into the discussion, a lot of that information may already be available, and it just needs to be added on. But we haven't had to really think a whole lot about that yet, because there isn't really a program in the Southeast that's similar to BearWise, but it's definitely being discussed as we move forward.
This is related. Does TWRA offer a BearWise certification program that offers benefits and/or official designation as a participating community?
I can answer that with 2 words, or 4 words. Not yet, but soon. We've been working towards that, and hopefully in the next 30 to 60 days, we will be able to make some pretty good strides in that. I don't know if we'll have anything official, hopefully maybe by the end of the calendar year, but that is definitely very high on our priority list. And it goes back to what I mentioned just a few minutes ago. It's all about finding partners to help you make things like that happen. And for us, it's a manpower issue, and we're looking at some new unique ways to address the manpower issue and the funding issue. And I'm looking forward to where we're going with that.
Great. Here's an interesting question. Is there any data to show that information for the public, be it websites, posters, magnets, etc., work to reduce conflicts absent provision of materials like bear-proof containers?
I appreciate that question, and I'm probably not going to answer it right, but I will say that it is something that the Large Carnivore Working Group and our subcommittee for BearWise, we talk a lot about the need to be able to go back and vet some of the things that we're utilizing, some of these resources, to see if they're doing what we want them to do. And LaVonne is real good at looking at those Google Analytics and seeing where people are going. And we have the ability to look at some of the pages where we're not getting a lot of traffic and maybe figure out what's going on there and why people may not be going to those areas. But I hope in the future we start seeing some formal research to look at some of the programs that BearWise is putting out there to, number one, make sure they're working, and number two, to tweak them if we need to. But and that's one of the things that, I've been looking for, that kind of information a long time, good scientific data that shows what works and what doesn't work. And it's pretty scarce. And but I do think, I will say this, we've had reports, I've never seen it, but I know I've heard about it, where people literally standing in front of a bear resistant trash can, looking it over, and then setting the trash bag down next to it, turn around, walking away because they don't know how to open it. So certainly, you got to have some education that goes along with some of these programs, or it's not going to work at all.
Yeah. We're running really tight on time, but I want to get this last question in there. What lessons have you all learned about partnering? What are the pitfalls folks should be aware of?
Well, it's like Bill said, you can't get the cart ahead of the horse. You got to take your time. I think another thing about partners, when you bring a bunch of people together in a task force, you need to be careful about how many people you're putting on the task force, just because you get bogged down with too many people, and then other folks expect someone else to do it. So keep an eye on membership, and just look for partners that can bring things to the game. I mean, if you've got 3 people that are experts in the same thing, there's really no need to bring the 4th one on there if you can help it. And but go after the low-hanging fruit, because low-hanging fruit equals success. And when these types of groups are successful, then that gives them empowerment and motivation to go after some other things that may be a little bit farther of a reach for them. So.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Linda, LaVonne, Dan, and Bill, for a great presentation. Tons of great material that you covered. Folks, obviously, take a look at that BearWise website. There's a lot of great stuff there. I'm really excited to see it expand through AFWA, like you mentioned, Dan, and elsewhere. That sounds like the bear populations are expanding, so this is needed more than ever. Folks, I included in the chat box a link to our next webinar, which is on June 17 at 3 o'clock Eastern Time, and it's titled Partnering with Communities to Conserve Battlefields, and the American Battlefield Trust will be presenting for that webinar, so you can register there. So with that, again, Linda, LaVonne, Dan, Bill, thank you so much. Dan, Bill, or Linda, any of you have any parting words for the group here?
Remember, it's a long haul.
I have one. I have one parting word. This is Linda. I've been the missing link between state agencies and bear biologists and the public for a very long time. And I think it is so amazing to finally find something that everyone can agree on and meet on, because everyone I know who works in human-bear conflict reduction, all the biologists, all the people who work for the agencies, they all care desperately about what they are doing. That's why they're doing it. And when people can understand that they too want to solve this problem, they're not just telling them what to do, they're giving them reasons why it needs to be done and what a difference it will make if they do it. I really think this is a great way to get everybody on the same page and kind of moving forward together, because they're all good guys.
Well said. Thank you so much, Linda. And thanks everyone for joining today. Great presentation again, folks. The recording will be posted to our YouTube channel, as well to the Network for Landscape Conservation website and our internal Park Service toolkit. So feel free to share those links when they're made available. Should be within the next week or so with others. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their month here and week. Take care.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.